Well, our story today is about a man named Robert E. Lee. No, not that Robert E. Lee. I know I'm old, but I'm not that old. I knew this guy. Robert was born in Chicago in 1916, in March of 1916, and his father was a chronic invalid. And when his father passed away, he had to drop out of high school, help support the family. The first job he took was as an usher in a movie theater. And I guess he saw a lot of movies because he had developed a great affection for music and for history. And it wasn't long he discovered that he had a great baritone voice, and he could project anywhere without the aid of artificial means. So he began singing in nightclubs. And in fact, when he joined the Army Air Corps after Pearl Harbor, he was in the Burma Theater, and he was often involved in entertaining troops. And he cut a record in the United Kingdom which sold over 1 million copies. And the name of the song that he recorded and done so well was Long Ago and Far Away. Now, I went online trying to find his voice. I wanted to hear him singing at this with this baritone voice that was so good. And it seems like just about everybody had sang that song at one time. Frank Sinatra, Goulet, Robert Goulet, and a host of female and male singers from even Johnny Ray had his version of it. And anyway, after the war, he was in the Burma theater of operation, and after the war, he went into radio and television. He developed several unique programs, which Assignment San Antonio. He was in Denver and Texas and San Diego a lot, and he formed an outfit called the Knothole Club, and Passport Adventures, Liberty International, the Open Road, which I think kind of led to the National Open Road by Charles Kuralt. And here in Arizona, you had Arizona Roads with Bill Leverton and his cameraman, Steve Bonet. And I done a lot of things with Bill Leverton. And he really took off for the longest time, and he was kind of a one-man show. He done everything. He not only filmed everything, he cut and spliced and wrote the script and narrated it. He done the whole ball of wax, all the editing. It's kind of like our producer here, Dave and Jane. They do it all too. They take the pictures and they do all the editing and searching for pictures that we can't come up with and what have you. And it's quite an operation. Anyway, Bob became interested in the Lost Dutchman Mine and the Superstition Mountains after he heard about the Adolph Ruth story, where Adolph Ruth went in and started searching for the Lost Dutchman Mine, and they didn't hear from him, and finally went out and found his body and all this sort of thing. And to call Bob a Dutch hunter would be a stretch, because he wasn't really interested in finding the mine. What he wanted to do is he wanted to make a documentary about the subject. And he done quite a bit of research. But the research that he did was reading about a dozen different books that we've talked about over some of these stories. One of the chief ones he studied was Sim Zealy, and we had a story on that. You could go back and watch the editor, the publisher of Sim Zealy's book, done some drastic cutting and additions, because he was the one that edited the whole thing, and in my opinion, quite a few mistakes were made. He read books by Barney Bernard and Kurt Gentry, The Killer Mountains, Travis Marlowe, the one who was involved with the stone maps, and all these old books we talk about. And he was heavily influenced by the movie Lust for Gold, based upon the book written by Barry Storm. Mr. Storm was quite upset with the film because they took some awful liberties with the information that was involved in it. I've seen that movie several times, and it's very entertaining. It's a nice movie to watch, but I wouldn't bank too much on the truth involved. He started his filming, it took quite a while to do this documentary. He started his filming in late '59 and 1960. His second trip in was in '62. Then he made 2 trips in 1972. This was all doing the filming and interviewing personnel that lived out in the mountains, such as Don Shade. Don was the person who found Walt Kassler's body in Unsolved Mysteries. And him and another fellow named Al Reeser, they used to come into the museum when we were up at Goldfield in 1990, and just to look at the collection of maps that we had on the wall up there. And once they'd been there and they kept coming back to study those maps, I always let them in free and take as much time as they wanted, take pictures of them and whatever. They've done a lot of study on the collection of maps that the museum had. And of course, Bill and Jerry Crater. They were packers who owned a lot of horses and took people on trips into the Superstition Mountains. And I was on a week-long trip that was in another story with Tom Collenborn and Bill Crater on one of their expeditions. And I was in the audiovisual business at the time, and Bill wanted to know if I could make him a slide presentation to help with his business. So we came to an agreement that if I did that, he would give me a horse. So I done the presentation and gave him the tray with all the slides in it, and he says, well, I guess I owe you a horse. And I said, I'll tell you what, Bill, you keep the horse and you just let me use it anytime I want, but you rent it out just like he's yours. And that worked pretty well for me. I don't know how it worked out for him. But then, of course, they saw Ed Piper out there and interviewed Ed Piper. Ed was involved with Celeste Jones in a major feud out there that got a couple of people killed, and the Forest Service got so upset with that, the sheriff and the Forest Service went in and disarmed everybody and passed a law that you couldn't camp in the same spot for more than 14 days at a time. And this broke up all the the territorial obsession people had with certain areas because they couldn't stay there any longer. And of course, he read the book Killer Mountain about Glenn McGill and their expedition in the mountains, which we just did a story on shortly ago that you can watch. He interviewed Barney Bernard, and we affectionately call Barney Bernard Blarney Bernard. You know, he put out a book that wasn't all that bad, but Barney had something to say about everything. And then, of course, there was Al Morrow. Al was killed in a cave-in in his tunnel in Needle Canyon between Blacktop Mesa and Bluff Springs Mountain. And it just so happened that it was Crazy Jake, passing through his camp on a number of times, realized that something was wrong. Al was always there, and Al come up missing. So Jake reported to the authorities, and Sheriff Hawkins went in with a posse, and they found his body in his tunnel where a huge boulder during a rainstorm had collapsed in on him and crushed him to death. And Bob interviewed Sheriff Hopkins about that at length. And of course, there was a host of other people that names are not as prominent as some that we just mentioned, that they interviewed and saw. And of course, that's why it took so long just doing these filming sessions. And then it was a couple of more years before the documentary got put together. Now, Tom Collenborn used to show his documentary after Lost Dutchman Days parade in Apache Junction every year. He would invite people to come to a certain place and view this video. And you can still find this on the internet. In fact, you can still find his book here on the internet, The Lost Dutchman Mine, and the subtitle is The Making of the Documentary on the Lost Dutchman Mine. And the only thing I would caution you about is the printing in this is so fine, I have difficulty reading it even with reading glasses. But this book can be found on the internet. And I met Bob a couple of times during these visits that he would come back for Lost Dutchman Days, and Tom would show his documentary. This photo is sometime in the late 70s or early 80s. I'm not sure exactly who even took the photo, but there's Tom and I and Bob and Ray Johnson. Everybody in the picture's gone now, but I invite you, if you're interested, to look up this video and book, and if you're interested, why, get you a copy. So there you have it, folks. Some of the most popular names of the Dutch hunters in the Superstition Mountains. He interviewed a lot of them. And all these people put together have spent over 100 years looking for the Lost Dutchman Mine. And they haven't found it yet, because that's just another mystery of the Superstition Mountains.
Thank you for watching this episode of Mysteries of the Superstition Mountains.